The night it all began, I found myself standing in the middle of a parking lot, barefoot, clutching a baseball bat. It was one of those surreal moments where your brain struggles to catch up with reality. It had started an hour earlier when I got a text from my neighbor, Eric, a guy I barely knew. His message read, "Hey, Andrew, thought you should know your wife's car is parked outside the green room. She's with some dude. Sorry if this is out of line." At first, I laughed it off. Margaret? My Margaret? At the green room? A jazz bar on the seedier side of town? No way. She'd always said jazz sounded like someone throwing a tantrum on a saxophone. But the thought festered. Eric wasn't the nosy type. He had nothing to gain from this. So, without thinking, I grabbed my keys and stormed out of the house. Somewhere between slamming the front door and starting the car, I realized I was still wearing my house slippers. By the time I pulled into the bar's lot, I was a cocktail of rage and adrenaline. And there it was, her car. Same license plate, same air freshener dangling from the rearview mirror. I killed the engine and sat there for a moment, gripping the steering wheel like it owed me money. My mind raced. What was I even going to do? Storm in and demand answers? Play it cool and casually bump into her? Before I could decide, I noticed a figure stepping out of the bar. It wasn't Margaret. It was Chloe. She looked around nervously, her heels clicking against the pavement as she approached Margaret's car. She opened the passenger door, reached inside, and pulled out a man's leather jacket. My stomach dropped. I knew that jacket, it wasn't mine. I bolted out of the car without a plan, only raw emotion. Chloe spun around, wide-eyed, clutching the jacket like it was evidence in a crime scene. Andrew! What are you doing here? I should ask you the same thing, I shot back. My voice didn't even sound like my own. She hesitated, then plastered on her fake smile, the one she always used when trying to wriggle out of trouble. Oh, Margaret asked me to grab this for her. She forgot it earlier. Forgot it where? I demanded, taking a step closer. Chloe faltered. Inside. She's, catching up with an old friend. Nothing sketchy, I promise. It was a lie. I could feel it in my gut. Without another word, I pushed past her and headed straight for the entrance. And that's when Chloe grabbed my arm, her voice dropping to a panicked whisper. Andrew, don't. Why not? I shot back, yanking my arm free. She looked at me like a deer caught in headlights, then sighed. Because if you go in there, you're not going to like what you see. I froze, Chloe's words rattling in my ears, "You're not going to like what you see." I stared her down, my body itching to move, but something in her tone made me pause. My fists were clenched so tight that my nails dug into my palms, but I forced my voice to stay level. Explain, I demanded. Chloe hesitated, looking over her shoulder toward the bar's entrance like she expected someone to burst out any second. She hugged the leather jacket closer to her chest, her expression darting between guilt and panic. Look, Andrew, maybe this isn't my place to say. Then why the hell did you text Eric? I interrupted. You wanted me here, didn't you? Her eyes widened. Eric? I didn't text Eric, she stopped herself, biting her lip. Okay, fine, I told him to check in, but I didn't think you'd actually show up. Why would I? My voice was rising now, the restraint slipping. Because my wife's sneaking around, and her best friend is playing courier for, who exactly? I pointed at the jacket. Her face flushed red, and for a second, I thought she'd bolt. But then she exhaled sharply, the kind of exhale someone lets out when they know there's no way out. All right, you want the truth? Fine. Margaret's inside with someone. A guy. I don't know much about him, just that it's not new. I wanted to believe she was lying, stirring up drama like she always did, but the way she avoided my eyes? That hit differently. My stomach tightened as I processed her words. My brain wanted to ask questions, but my legs had a different plan. Move, I snapped. Andrew, wait. Move. I didn't yell, but the force in my voice made her step aside. I marched past her and toward the entrance, my heart pounding so loud it drowned out everything else. The green room wasn't the kind of place I'd ever pictured Margaret frequenting. Dim lighting, sticky floors, and a lingering smell of stale beer and fried food greeted me as I walked in. Jazz spilled out of a stage in the corner, the kind of chaotic, off-tempo noise she couldn't stand. The place was crowded but not packed, and I scanned the room like a hunter tracking his prey. It didn't take long. There she was, tucked into a booth near the back, her face partially obscured by the shadows. Margaret was sitting across from a man, mid-40s, sharp suit, clean-cut. He had his hand resting casually on hers, their heads tilted close enough that it looked intimate. Too intimate. I froze, my breath caught in my throat. My wife, who couldn't stand public displays of affection, looked relaxed. Laughing. Like she didn't have a care in the world. I forced myself to move, weaving through the tables until I was close enough to hear their conversation. "I can't believe you did that," she said, her voice carrying that soft, playful tone she used to reserve for me. "It was worth it," the man replied, his tone smooth, confident. They were so absorbed in each other they didn't notice me until I was right beside the booth. "Margaret." Her head snapped toward me, her smile dropping instantly. "Andrew? What are you doing here?" I ignored her question and turned to the man. "Who the hell are you?" He raised an eyebrow, leaning back in his seat like I'd just interrupted a business meeting. "I'm Tom," he said casually, as if that was supposed to mean something to me. "Tom who?" Margaret jumped in, her voice panicked. "Andrew, it's not what it looks like." I slammed my hand on the table, cutting her off. "Then what the hell is it, Margaret?" "Because it looks a lot like you're holding hands with some guy while I'm sitting at home wondering why my wife's been acting like a stranger." She flinched, pulling her hand away from his. Tom just sat there, cool as ice, like he thrived on the tension. "Maybe we should take this outside," he said. I turned to him, my anger boiling over. "Shut up. I'm not talking to you." "Andrew, please," Margaret pleaded, standing up and grabbing my arm. "Let's go home and talk about this." I yanked my arm away. "No. We talk here. Now." "Who is he?" She hesitated, her eyes darting between me and Tom. That hesitation was all I needed to know. "You're cheating on me," I said flatly. The words felt foreign in my mouth, like they didn't belong to me. "Andrew, Answer me." My voice echoed through the bar, drawing the attention of nearby patrons. Tom finally stood, raising his hands in mock surrender. "All right, let's calm down." I turned on him, my fists clenching. "Do not tell me to calm down." A bouncer appeared out of nowhere, stepping between us. "All right, guys, let's take this outside. We don't need any trouble here." "Trouble?" I laughed bitterly. "The only trouble here is my wife screwing around behind my back." Margaret gasped. "Andrew, stop." But I wasn't done. "How long, Margaret? How long have you been lying to me? How long have you been meeting up with this Tom?" She looked like she was about to cry, but I didn't care. She opened her mouth to speak, but Tom interrupted. "Look, man, I don't think you want to do this here." I turned to him, my voice dangerously low. "You think I'm afraid to make a scene? You think I care about your feelings? Andrew, stop it." Margaret grabbed my arm again, pulling me back. "Let's just go home, please." Her touch felt wrong, like poison. I yanked my arm free again and stepped back, my chest heaving. "You know what? Fine. Let's go. But you're explaining everything. Every damn detail." Her shoulders sagged in defeat. Without another word, I turned and stormed out of the bar, not waiting to see if she was following. As the cool night air hit me, I realized my hands were trembling. I clenched them into fists, trying to steady myself. Margaret appeared a moment later, her eyes red and glossy. "I'm sorry," she said softly. "Save it, I snapped. You can be sorry after you tell me the truth. We got into the car in silence, the tension suffocating. I didn't even glance at her as I drove, my grip on the wheel so tight my knuckles turned white. The ride home was suffocating. Margaret sat silent in the passenger seat, staring out the window, her arms crossed defensively. My knuckles stayed white on the steering wheel, my mind racing. I didn't say a word. I didn't trust myself to speak without the anger boiling over. The moment we stepped into the house, it all came crashing down. All right, Margaret. Start talking, I snapped, slamming the door shut behind me. The sound echoed through the empty living room. She calmly took off her coat and tossed it onto the armchair, as if we'd just come back from a casual dinner. That set me off even more. Don't act like this is normal. I shouted, my voice raw. You were out with another man, holding hands, laughing like a damn couple. What the hell is going on? She turned to face me, and what I saw nearly knocked the wind out of me. She was smiling. Not nervously, not apologetically, she was smirking, like she'd won some kind of game. What the hell is wrong with you? I asked, stunned. She leaned against the armchair, her posture relaxed, her arms crossed casually. What's wrong with me? That's funny, Andrew. Real funny. I'm not laughing, I said through gritted teeth. Start explaining. She tilted her head slightly, her smirk widening. How does it feel, Andrew? To finally know what it's like to be on the receiving end? What the hell are you talking about? Her voice was calm, almost mocking. Oh, come on. Don't play dumb. You thought you could do whatever you wanted and get away with it? Thought you'd never have to deal with the consequences? I blinked, completely lost. What are you even saying? What consequences? Her smirk twisted into a cruel grin. You really don't get it, do you? This is payback. Payback? I repeated, my voice rising again. For what? What the hell did I do to deserve this? She pushed off the armchair and stepped closer, her tone dripping with confidence. Oh, I don't know, Andrew. Maybe for screwing around behind my back. You think I wouldn't find out? You think you're so smart, so untouchable? I stared at her, dumbfounded. What are you talking about? I didn't screw around. Are you seriously trying to pin your cheating on me? Her laughter was cold and sharp. Don't even try to deny it. Chloe told me everything. Chloe? My stomach turned. What the hell did Chloe tell you? She told me about your little affair, Margaret said, her eyes narrowing. How you slept with her last year while I was out of town. How you begged her to keep it a secret. How you laughed behind my back. I took a step back, stunned into silence. What? Don't act surprised, she said, her voice laced with venom. She told me everything, Andrew. I've known for months. That's why I decided to even the score. For a moment, I was too shocked to respond. Chloe had told her I had an affair? With her? The accusation was so out of left field, so ridiculous, I didn't even know where to begin. That's insane, I finally stammered. I didn't sleep with Chloe. I've never even thought about Chloe like that. Margaret rolled her eyes, her smirk returning. Oh, please. She had no reason to lie. She told me how it happened. How you came onto her when she was drunk, how you made her feel like it was her fault. God, Andrew, you're disgusting. The room spun as her words sank in. I wanted to yell, to punch something, to make her understand how absurd this was. But all I could do was stand there, staring at her in disbelief. You seriously believe Chloe over me? I finally said, my voice trembling with rage. Why wouldn't I? She shot back. She's my best friend. She wouldn't lie to me about something like this. She's lying, Margaret. I yelled. She's lying to you, and you're too blind to see it. Her laugh cut through me like a knife. Oh, of course she's lying. Everyone's lying except you, right?
Poor Andrew, the innocent victim. I clenched my fists, struggling to keep my composure. Why the hell would I cheat on you, Margaret? And with Chloe, of all people? She's always hated me.
Exactly, she snapped.
And maybe that's why she finally came clean. Maybe she got tired of covering for you.
I shook my head, the absurdity of the situation overwhelming.
So, what? You just took her word for it? Decided to believe her without even asking me? And your solution was to go out and cheat on me with some random guy?
She folded her arms, her expression hardening.
Not random. Tom's been in my life for a while.
At least he knows how to treat a woman. Her words hit me like a sledgehammer. I felt my anger boiling over, my body trembling with the effort to hold it back.
You're unbelievable, I said, my voice shaking. You believed a lie.
You threw away our marriage over nothing.
And now you're standing here, acting like you're proud of yourself? She didn't flinch. I did what I had to do, Andrew. You deserved it.
No, Margaret, I said, my voice low and cold.
I didn't. I've never cheated on you. I've never even thought about it. But you?
You just blew up our life over some sick, twisted story Chloe fed you. Her expression faltered for a brief moment, but she quickly recovered.
You're lying. You have to be. Chloe wouldn't.
She would, I interrupted.
And she did.
Because she's jealous. Because she's always hated us. And now she's laughing her ass off because you fell for it. Margaret stared at me, her confidence cracking. But before she could respond, I turned and stormed out of the room.
I needed space. I needed air. But most of all, I needed to figure out what the hell I was going to do next.
The next morning, I woke up with one thought in my head: this couldn't end here. I wasn't going to let my marriage be torn apart by a lie, especially one as outrageous as the one Chloe had spun. If Margaret wanted to believe her, fine, but she was going to hear the truth, even if I had to drag it out of Chloe myself.
By midday, I'd made up my mind.
I texted Margaret, who was upstairs sulking in the bedroom, to meet me in the living room. She appeared minutes later, her face a mix of irritation and exhaustion.
What now, Andrew?
She asked, crossing her arms.
We're calling Chloe, I said flatly.
Her eyes narrowed.
Why? Because I'm not doing this anymore.
We're going to sit down, the three of us, and get everything out in the open. I want to hear exactly what she claims happened directly from her mouth, and then I'll prove she's lying.
Margaret let out a sarcastic laugh. Oh, so now you're the victim? You really think this is going to change anything?
You owe me that much, I said, my voice firm.
If you're so sure she's telling the truth, then what's the harm in letting her say it to my face?
For a moment, she just stared at me.
Then, with a dramatic sigh, she muttered, "Fine. But don't think for a second that this is going to make me doubt her."
She pulled out her phone and dialed Chloe.
"Hey, can you come over? Andrew wants to talk, yeah, about that." "Alright, see you in 20 minutes.
When Chloe arrived, she didn't look the least bit nervous. In fact, she strutted into the living room like she owned the place, throwing a smug glance in my direction. "What's this about?" she asked, flopping onto the couch next to Margaret.
"I think you know," I replied, sitting across from them. "Since you've been so eager to tell Margaret all about this supposed affair, why don't you tell me too? Let's hear it."
Chloe smirked, leaning back comfortably.
"You really want to do this, Andrew? Fine. Let's talk about that night."
Margaret looked at her expectantly, and Chloe launched into her story with the confidence of someone who thought they were untouchable. "It was last year, during that office holiday party," she began, her tone casual.
"Margaret was out of town, remember?
And you were there with some of your work friends.
I'd had a little too much to drink, nothing crazy, but enough to loosen up, and you offered to give me a ride home."
I clenched my fists, forcing myself to stay calm.
"Go on."
She shrugged. "We got to my place, and I guess you thought I was sending signals, because before I knew it, you were all over me."
I was too drunk to fight you off, and, well, you know the rest.
The bile rose in my throat as she finished, her smirk firmly in place. Margaret's expression was one of cold fury, but not directed at Chloe, at me. "You're disgusting," Margaret said, her voice trembling with anger.
"I can't believe you. She's lying."
I interrupted, my voice loud enough to make both women flinch.
"This never happened. I wasn't even at that party." Chloe raised an eyebrow. "Really? That's convenient. Too bad I have texts from you that night proving you were there."
She pulled out her phone and started scrolling, but I wasn't going to sit there and let her manipulate the situation any further.
"Margaret," I said, turning to my wife. "Think about this for a second. Does this story make any sense to you? Have I ever given you any reason to believe I'd do something like that? Have I ever even looked at Chloe that way?" "She's my best friend, Andrew," Margaret snapped. "Why would she lie to me about something like this? Maybe because she hates me." I shot back.
"Maybe because she's jealous of us, and she wanted to tear us apart."
Chloe let out a mocking laugh.
"Oh, please.
Do you hear yourself?
You sound pathetic." I ignored her, focusing on Margaret.
"You know me, Margaret. You know who I am. Why would you believe her over me?" But Margaret's expression didn't soften. If anything, it hardened. "Because you've been acting guilty ever since I found out. You're defensive, angry, desperate to cover your tracks. That doesn't scream innocence, Andrew."
I stared at her, my heart sinking.
"I'm angry because I didn't do it, and you won't even listen to me."
Chloe leaned forward, her smile turning sinister.
"Look, Andrew, I get it. You're trying to save face. But let's cut the crap.
Margaret knows the truth, and she's not going to let you weasel your way out of this.
And just so we're clear, if you think about dragging this out, or if you try to take anything in the divorce, I'll make sure you regret it."
I turned to her sharply.
"What the hell are you talking about?" She smiled sweetly. "If you push this, I'll go to the police.
I'll tell them exactly what happened that night, and we both know how that'll end for you."
A man accused of assaulting a drunk woman? Good luck convincing anyone you're innocent." The room went silent.
Margaret looked stunned, but she didn't say a word.
"You're threatening me?"
I said quietly, my rage barely contained.
"Call it what you want," Chloe replied, her tone icy.
"But I think we both know it's in your best interest to walk away quietly.
No one wants this to get ugly."
I looked at Margaret, hoping and praying that she'd see the insanity of this situation. But her expression was unreadable.
"Margaret," I said, my voice breaking. "You're really going to let her do this? You're really going to stand by her while she threatens me with a lie?"
She hesitated, but then her eyes met mine, cold and unyielding.
"I don't know what to believe anymore, Andrew. Maybe it's better if you just go." It felt like a punch to the gut.
I stood there for a moment, staring at the woman I'd spent 12 years with, the woman I thought I knew better than anyone. And then, without another word, I turned and walked out the door.
If this was how it was going to be, then I'd fight back. But not here. Not now. Not on their terms.
I drove aimlessly for over an hour, the radio off, my mind replaying the confrontation like a broken record. Chloe's smug face, Margaret's cold eyes, and that gut-wrenching feeling of betrayal, they wouldn't leave me alone.
It wasn't just anger anymore. It was rage, humiliation, and the undeniable need to clear my name. Chloe thought she could corner me with her lies.
Margaret believed her without hesitation.
And I was supposed to walk away quietly, letting them ruin my life? Hell no.
By the time I parked in a random lot near the edge of town, I had decided I wasn't going to let this slide. But this wasn't just about proving my innocence anymore, it was about exposing Chloe for the manipulative snake she was and making Margaret see just how blind she'd been. If Chloe wanted to base her entire story on the office holiday party, I'd start there.
The problem? I hadn't gone, and I needed proof.
I pulled out my phone and scrolled through my calendar, trying to piece together what I'd done that night.
It hit me like a lightning bolt. That was the weekend I'd visited my parents in Wisconsin. I'd driven out Friday night and stayed until Sunday. I called my mom immediately. "Andrew?
Everything all right?" she asked, concern in her voice.
"Yeah, Mom. Listen, quick question. Do you remember the weekend I visited last December? The week before Christmas?"
"Of course. You were here Friday through Sunday."
"Why?" I let out a breath I didn't realize I was holding.
"Do you still have the pictures you took that weekend?
The ones from dinner and when we set up the tree?
I should."
"Why? What's going on?"
"Long story," I muttered.
"Can you send me those pictures and anything with a timestamp? Like, right now?"
She agreed, albeit a little confused, and within 10 minutes, my phone lit up with photos of me sitting at my parents' dining table, helping my dad with the Christmas lights, and drinking hot cocoa in the living room.
All timestamped for that weekend.
It wasn't enough to prove I wasn't at the party, I needed to figure out why Chloe was doing this.
Why fabricate something so damaging? Why now?
I went back through every interaction I'd had with her over the years, looking for a motive. She'd never liked me, but I'd chalked it up to her being a toxic personality. Margaret always excused her behavior, calling her opinionated or misunderstood. But something clicked when I thought back to last year. Chloe had just gotten divorced. Her ex-husband had cheated on her, and she'd been a mess for months. Margaret had spent countless hours consoling her, even dragging me into it at one point.
I remembered the conversation now.
Chloe had been drunk, ranting about how men were all the same. She'd pointed at me and said something like, "Even the good ones."
"Just wait, Margaret. He'll screw up. They always do."
At the time, I'd laughed it off. Now, I realized that might have been the seed of all this. Maybe she wanted to prove her twisted point.
Maybe she was projecting her bitterness onto me. Or maybe she just wanted to destroy what she couldn't have, a stable relationship.
Chloe had made a critical mistake when she said she had texts from me. If those texts existed, she would have shown them at the house. The fact that she didn't meant she had nothing, or she was working on fabricating something. Decided to test her bluff.
The next morning, I sent her a text. "Me, Chloe, I've been thinking about what you said. I need to talk. Can we meet privately?"
She responded almost immediately.
"Chloe, why? What's left to talk about?" "Me, I need to make this right. Please. Just give me 30 minutes.
She agreed to meet at a coffee shop near her place later that afternoon. I chose the location carefully, somewhere public, where she couldn't pull any stunts. When I arrived, she was already there, sitting by the window with her phone in hand. She looked smug, like she thought I was coming to grovel. "Andrew," she said with a smile as I sat down.
"I wasn't expecting this. Ready to admit the truth?"
"Something like that," I replied, keeping my tone neutral.
"I've been thinking about everything, and I just want to understand. Why would you say those things about me? Why now?"
Her smile faltered for a split second before she recovered. "Because Margaret deserves to know the truth.
You can't hide forever."
"All right," I said, leaning forward.
"Let's talk about the truth. Show me the texts."
She froze, her hand tightening around her phone.
"Excuse me?" "The texts," I repeated.
"You said you have them. If you're so confident I did this, prove it. Show me the messages I supposedly sent." Her expression hardened.
"I don't owe you anything, Andrew."
"That's what I thought," I said, my voice calm but firm.
"You don't have anything, do you?"
"You've been lying this whole time." She glared at me, her confidence cracking.
"Why are you even here? To intimidate me? To make me back down?"
"No," I replied. "I'm here to give you one last chance to tell the truth before this blows up in your face."
"Because I'm not going to back down.
I have proof I wasn't at that party.
I have proof you're lying. And if you want to drag this into court, I'll make sure everyone knows exactly who you are." Her face paled. For the first time, she looked genuinely afraid. "You wouldn't dare." "Try me," I said, standing up. "You've got 24 hours to come clean. After that, I'm done playing nice."
I left without waiting for her response. When I got home, Margaret was waiting in the living room, her arms crossed.
"Where have you been?" she demanded. "Getting answers," I said, holding up my phone.
"And now you're going to sit down and listen to me, because I'm done letting you believe Chloe's lies." She hesitated but eventually sat down. I showed her the photos from my parents' house, the timestamps clear as day.
This is where I was that weekend. Not at the party. Not with Chloe. With my family. Now, you tell me, how could I have assaulted her if I wasn't even there?
Margaret's face went pale as she stared at the screen.
I don't know," she whispered.
"You don't know because it didn't happen," I said firmly. "Chloe lied to you, and you let her destroy our marriage. But I'm done taking the blame for something I didn't do."
"If you want to believe her over me, fine. But I'm not going to let her ruin my life without a fight." Margaret didn't respond.
For the first time, I saw doubt in her eyes. Now, all I needed was for Chloe to make her next move.
And whatever she chose, I'd be ready. Chloe didn't take long to make her next move. Less than 24 hours after our meeting, I got a call from Margaret.
She sounded panicked, her voice trembling. "Andrew," she said, "Chloe just called me. She said you threatened her yesterday and demanded she lie about what happened." I exhaled sharply, gripping the phone tighter.
"Are you serious, Margaret?" "She's lying again."
She sounded scared, Margaret replied. "She said you told her you'd ruin her life if she didn't take it all back."
"That's because I called her bluff," I said, keeping my voice steady.
"I told her I have proof she's lying, and now she's scrambling to cover her tracks."
"Did she mention the supposed texts again?"
There was a pause. "No, but she said she's going to the police if you don't stop."
I let out a humorless laugh.
"Of course she did. She's trying to scare me into backing off."
"Don't you see what's happening, Margaret?"
"She's cornered, and this is all she's got left." Margaret didn't respond right away, and when she finally spoke, her voice was quieter.
"Andrew, I don't know what to think anymore." "Then start thinking critically," I snapped. "Ask yourself why she's suddenly so afraid of me.
Why she hasn't shown you a single shred of real evidence.
And why I'd even bother threatening her if I was guilty. Does any of that make sense to you?" Another long pause.
Finally, she said, "I'll talk to her again."
"You do that," I said, hanging up. I knew Chloe wasn't bluffing about going to the police. She was desperate, and desperate people did stupid things.
So, I spent the rest of the day gathering every piece of evidence I could think of, the pictures from my parents' house, phone records showing I hadn't called or texted her that weekend, and even old texts between Margaret and me proving we discussed my trip at the time. By the time I was done, I had enough to prove Chloe's story was full of holes. But what I didn't have was a way to make her back down. 2 days later, I got the call I'd been expecting. It wasn't from Chloe, it was from the police. "Mr. Andrew," the officer asked.
"That's me. We've received a report involving a claim of inappropriate behavior. Would you be willing to come down to the station for a conversation?"
My stomach twisted, but I forced myself to stay calm. "Of course.
I'll be there in an hour." I didn't waste any time.
I grabbed my folder of evidence and called a lawyer, a family friend named Jason who owed me a favor. By the time I walked into the station, Jason was by my side, his presence a steadying force. The detective assigned to the case explained Chloe's allegations in detail, claiming that I had coerced her during an interaction while she was intoxicated. Chloe had even provided a statement describing the event, complete with fabricated details about the supposed encounter.
I listened quietly, keeping my emotions in check.
When the detective finished, I handed over my evidence. "Detective," I said, "I appreciate you taking this seriously, but her story is entirely false.
I wasn't even at the party she's talking about." I was in Wisconsin with my family.
Jason chimed in, pointing out the timestamps on the photos, my phone records, and the complete lack of any previous claims from Chloe.
The detective reviewed everything carefully, asking a few pointed questions before finally nodding. "All right," he said.
"We'll need to verify all of this, but if your evidence checks out, it significantly undermines her story."
When I got home, Margaret was waiting for me in the kitchen.
Her face was pale, her eyes red and swollen.
"Chloe called me," she said as I walked in.
"Of course she did," I replied, dropping my bag on the counter.
"What did she say this time?"
"She told me she went to the police," Margaret said, her voice shaking. "She said you're dangerous, Andrew.
That I need to protect myself."
I stared at her, feeling a wave of exhaustion wash over me.
"And what do you think, Margaret? Do you think I'm dangerous?"
She looked away, tears streaming down her face.
"I don't know what to believe anymore."
"That's not good enough," I said, my voice firm. "You've known me for 12 years.
You've seen the kind of man I am. And now you're willing to throw it all away because of Chloe's lies?"
"She's my best friend," Margaret said weakly.
"And I'm your husband." I shot back. "Or does that mean nothing to you anymore?"
She flinched, and for a moment, I thought she might break. But then she said, "You can't expect me to choose between you and her."
"You already did," I said,
my voice cold.
"And you didn't choose me."
She didn't respond, and I realized then that there was no saving this.
Even if I cleared my name, the trust between us was gone.
"I'm filing for divorce," I said, my voice steady. Margaret's head snapped up, her eyes wide with shock.
"What?" "You heard me," I said. "You chose Chloe over me, and now I'm choosing myself.
I'm done fighting for someone who doesn't believe in me." She started to protest, but I held up a hand.
"Don't.
You made your choice, Margaret.
Now live with it." The police investigation cleared me within a week.
The evidence was overwhelming, and Chloe's story fell apart under scrutiny. But the damage she'd caused lingered. Word of the allegations spread through my social circle, and while many believed my side of the story, others didn't. Margaret and I finalized our divorce within a few months. I let her keep most of the marital assets, not because I thought she deserved them, but because I wanted a clean break. I didn't want anything tying me to her, or Chloe, any longer than necessary. As for Chloe, I considered suing her for defamation, but my lawyer advised against it.
The cost, both financial and emotional, wasn't worth it. Instead, I focused on rebuilding my life, one step at a time.
Margaret tried to reach out a few times after the divorce, but I ignored her messages.
I wasn't interested in apologies or explanations.
She'd made her choice, and I'd made mine. In the end, I learned a hard lesson about trust, loyalty, and the lengths people will go to protect their own insecurities.